It's me again. I'm going to scoot this little podium right out here real quick. And wasn't Tina great? Everybody's been great today. It's amazing the things that God can challenge us with and put in front of us that we don't anticipate or expect in our lives, such as, her losing her husband. Who would have thought a simple day to the lake would cause something like that to happen? And same thing with suicide. There is, since we've been here today, you figure there's probably 60 people in the U.S. that has taken their life. It's a lot, isn't it? It mounts up, and over the course of the year, there's nearly 50,000 people that will take their life. But to go back and tell you how I got started in all of this choosing to live ideology and what has brought me to the point where I want to live and I want to be here because I love seeing all your little faces. You got a lot of energy today. I've seen you pumping the muscles and everything else for God. That's awesome. Isn't God good? He's got me here today, which is a true blessing. And to go back, for me it is at least, to go back, my childhood, I grew up in Springfield, Missouri. My grandparents were born in Branson. And so I've always had a little tie to Branson, which it feels good to be here. And I sang here back in the day at one time, and I got to do some shows. But I grew up in Springfield. I had a modest childhood. My parents weren't well off. My dad had a nursery business, which meant he was self-employed. And through the 70s, he worked from sun up to sundown. That was what he did. And it was always a struggle, especially come Christmas time and the fall when things would slow down a little bit, and the economy, depending on what it did. It seems like there was always something that was holding him back a little bit. And, financially, when your parents are struggling, as a child, most of the time they don't let you know those things, or at least my parents didn't. We never went without. I was the best dressed kid in school, but it was because we went down to the Christian Foundation and got most of my clothes. Anybody else ever do that?
Yeah.
Get the Goodwill? I grew up on all that. And I still love that way of shopping. So anyway, I had a good childhood. Everything was fine. But I remember feeling this depression when I was about 5. I remember wanting to walk out in front of a car because I'd been scolded. I was in trouble. I was at my grandmother's house. And I took off walking after I got in trouble. I was just 5, and I thought about walking in front of a car, which glad I didn't. And I'm sure everybody else was glad. But I had those thoughts at that early of an age. Who would have thought that a child would have those thoughts? But sometimes we do. And it's genetics sometimes. It's not necessarily our circumstances, but just it's in us for some reason. And I have to say that my mother's a prayer warrior. Who else is a prayer warrior out there for your family? All you mamas especially. But she always prayed over me and prayed for me. And she would tell me as a teenager, and even as an adult, she reminds me sometimes, that the devil had come to her one time when I was a baby. I don't know if it was in a dream or what, but basically threatened her. Said, he's mine. And she fought. She said, no, he's not. And from that day on, she prayed over me. I hated it at times as a teenager because I felt like she was being too protective or, keeping me from having fun or doing things. But I am here to tell you today, ladies, if you have that in your soul to pray for your babies, and I hope you do, those prayers never go unanswered. I'm here today because I believe that my mother prayed for me and prayed over me, and she does to this day. And unfortunately, I travel a lot around the country, going different places. I've worked a lot of music tours and different things. And she still wants me to call her when I get to the hotel. Is that weird? But I've got 2 daughters, one 32 and one 24. And I'm no different with them. I want to know that they're safe and where they need to be. And I've always prayed over them as well. But I say all that to say that prayer is so magical. It's unbelievable that God wants us to talk to him personally. And I've had friends that have come to me and said, man, I really don't know how to pray. And there's no right way to pray. Wouldn't you agree? It's a conversation. You can be as formal as you want to be. God don't care how great your English is, how great your grammar is. He knows your heart. He just wants to hear from you. And I've done a lot of that through the years. I've had to seek his guidance and a lot of forgiveness. Lord, I'm not sure why I did that, but you made me. You probably know. But not that I can blame it on him, though, right? Get a little wild sometimes. But God's been good to me. But as I was in high school, I went through a lot of the things that a lot of these young girls were talking about. There's your peers, you know, things that you deal with at school. It's just normal stuff. And it stinks because your hormones are going crazy and they're raging. And like I say, boys, we don't get our brains really till we're about 25. And it took me a while to agree with that. But now that I look back and I'm 52 now, I go, okay, it's maybe 32 for me. That's when I got mine. But I got married very early. I was married at 19, so I had to grow up fast. But in high school, I was always a part of the music activities, and I played baseball. Baseball was my love. It was my dream. I did it since I was a little boy. My dad played professional baseball. He signed with the Yankees out of high school, and I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Sometimes we feel like we mold ourselves after somebody, and this was my dad. I idolized my dad. Still do. And I'm lucky I still got him. But I wanted to be a baseball player. That was my dream. And in high school, I was a great baseball player. I was a pitcher, first base, third base. I threw a hard baseball, mid-90s. I had a good overhand curveball. And I was going to go play baseball. The coach would come to me and say, hey, we got these letters for you to go to college. You know, they're offering you a scholarship. Do you want to go to so-and-so? I'm like, no, not really. What are you talking about? You can go to college for free. Well, 4 years of high school seemed really long. So I thought 4 years of college was going to be really long. I didn't want to do that. And of course, being in love with every girl I saw, and, you know, I needed to get my life started, and I was trying to romance everybody and sweet talk everybody. And that wasn't always a good thing. But I had an opportunity my senior year to play baseball with the Cardinals. I got an invitation to come up to Busch Stadium for an invitational tryout. And we were in some talks about what it was going to take for me to be a ball player, play professional baseball. It would have been minor league ball, I'm sure. But that's all my dream was. That's all I had ever lived for, all I ever wanted to do. And so while I was in high school playing baseball, I did the next best thing that any young man would do. I became an Elvis impersonator. I loved Elvis. So my senior year of high school, I had this teacher there that encouraged me to sing. I would do every spring assembly or Christmas assemblies or whatever. It was always a Elvis tribute of some sort, you know, Christmas music or whatever. I'll have a blue Christmas without you. Did all that stuff. Yeah, you like that? And of course now, she mentioned I was an Elvis tribute artist. Back then they called them impersonators. I can't fit in the jumpsuits anymore. So I'm not going to go back to that career anytime soon. But anyway, I was singing, playing baseball. That's all I cared about. Well, the spring of 1989, I was playing a game. I had a no-hitter going, throwing a baseball like crazy. It was nice and hot out, working up a sweat. Next thing I know, I throw my arm out, and I got tendonitis in my elbow. So we go to the sports medicine, and they basically say he's done. He'll never throw again. You know, if he wants to wait a year, maybe go to school, which at that time, I had told all the colleges no. They didn't want to have anything to do with me at that point because you can't throw a baseball. And they're not sure what it's going to be like in a year or two. So I did something that nobody expected. I went into a horrible depression, which I'd already suffered through high school, dealing with depression and anxiety and stress and all that stuff. I was friends with everybody. I didn't have it bad. Growing up, I was picked on a lot, but when I got to high school, I got bigger than a lot of those boys, and so they couldn't pick on me, so life was a little better. And I had girlfriends. But anyway, I did something that nobody thought I would do. I quit high school 6 weeks before graduation. 6 weeks. All the teachers were in tears, and I was spoiled. I was a brown noser. I loved all my teachers. They loved me. They were good to me. They said, Louie, just come back in the summer. Just finish. You're so close. But for me at that time, that dark cloud that I had over me with the depression was so heavy that I was going to take my life. And my parents didn't really know what to do. They were worried about me. They took me to the doctor. And of course, my doctor, I told him, that I didn't want to live. And so he immediately had my parents take me to a hospital a mental hospital in Springfield, and they started locking doors behind me. And I thought, well, this isn't right, you know? And I said, well, when can I have phone privileges? Because, you know, I've got a girlfriend I need to call, you know, important stuff. Well, come to find out, you couldn't make any phone calls, and you had to be there for at least 2 weeks, and that was really going to disrupt my lifestyle. So I got my dad on the phone, and we talked, and I convinced him to let me come home, and he did. He told my mom, bring me back home, and I had to start making changes at that point. And unbeknownst to them, I got into some trouble a time or two with the law, nothing major. I didn't kill nobody. Nobody got hurt. But I got in some trouble, which caused, what else? More depression. You're wondering what your purpose is here, and I can't do anything right, and nobody loves me, and my career's done, or what I thought was a career, you know. When you're that age, everything's a big deal, right? When you're in high school, it's just, everything's a big deal. So anyway, shortly after I ended up going back home, there was a moment in time during that summer where I had a breakup with a girlfriend, lost my job, and I wasn't required to actually really have a job all the time. My dad was one of those that as long as you're playing baseball and your grades are good and you're behaving, you won't have a new car because we can't afford one, but I'll make sure I help you and you'll get by. It'll be okay. We'll make it work. And so once I started screwing around and stuff, it was time to pay my own insurance, pay my own gas, figure things out. Well, and I'm not saying that's the reason for my depression at this point. There was a lot of other things that were involved in that. But I ended up one night, I drove down to a rock quarry, which is also a state park up here called Busick. Anybody ever drive by that? Yeah, up on 65. This place has brought me a lot of happy times too. But I drove down there that day with the intention of taking my life. And I had a gun with me that I had received from somebody that they didn't know why I wanted it or why I needed it. And I just, told them I was afraid to, run around by myself, which back then, what have I got to be afraid of? I'm, a teenage boy, unless I'm doing something stupid or bad. But my intention was to have that gun to take my life. I didn't know when, I didn't know where, but I wanted to have it just in case I needed it at that moment to do something. And so I drove to Busick, and at the time, the rock quarry that they've got down there now wasn't quite as big. It was a little smaller. They weren't mining rock out of it at that time. They had kind of taken a pause. But I drove down there. It was late at night, and thought my world was done. I thought, I've disappointed my parents. I've disappointed my friends. I've stolen. I've done things that were stupid. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I don't have any purpose. And I ended up shooting through my windshield, or through my window. And when I did that, if you're familiar with firearms, this was a 9mm, and it ended up kicking back and scarring my hand up, caused me to bleed. It scared me. Yeah, believe it or not, something as small as that, I thought, how are you going to handle this other? But it scared me. And that was a warning signal for me to wake up and know what was really going on that night. God came to me in that little truck I had. I had a little 81 Toyota 4x4. I was down there by myself, and thinking back now, there's hardly room for one person in one of those. But I was thinking as I was going through the motions of what I was going to do, all the film came through my head of what they were going to see when they found me, or what they were going to talk about, or I imagined the patrolman down there going, okay, well, what's his address say on his driver's license? Well, they're going to go to that house. They're going to go find the next of kin, right? They're going to find my parents. They're going to tell them, we found your boy, and he's not here. So everything that my mother had ever prayed over me came back to me 100 times that night. I kept thinking about her, thinking about my father, what it would do to them, how it would crush them. And not that I was the perfect child. My sister was the perfect child. And I love her dearly. But she was the one that's always, T's were crossed and the I's were dotted. Then there's Louie over there like, what's he doing? He's staring out the window. He's a dreamer. And I was a dreamer. I'm still a dreamer. But I didn't want my parents to have to face that because I knew it would crush them. They wouldn't be able to go on. My sister wouldn't have a good life. They wouldn't be able to give her a good life. Their life would just be, or maybe I was always thinking that I was a little more special than I was, but their life would have been disrupted. It would have been horrible. And that's one thing about suicide people don't realize. And if you ever think about that, there are so many people, I call it the collateral damage that's left behind, that are affected by suicide. How many of you in here know somebody that has committed suicide? It's a lot of you. And it never leaves you, does it? Everybody's thoughts are always, what could I have said? What could I have done? What would have changed it? I tell you, prayer changes things. Encouragement changes things. A lot of times people are going to do what they're going to do. You can't stop it sometimes. But if we see the warning signs, we can sometimes head that off and get them help. And there's people that call me all the time and say, what about my brother just called me and he said he's going to take his life and he's sitting here, sitting there, whatever. Unfortunately, we have to call somebody. We have to get them help. And a lot of people say, well, I don't want to interfere and I don't want them mad at me for having them checked into the hospital for 72 hours. Sometimes you have to. You just have to. And so don't ever think that you can't do that or, you don't want to do that you don't want to upset somebody. You got to get them help, number one. So I say all that to say this. I made it through that moment. I got out of there that night alive, thankfully, right? I survived. But I know God came to me. And I know, and I give so much credit to my mother through the years for that, because I know she constantly prayed over me. And she still prays for me, and I feel it every day. I feel it right now. It never goes away. So mamas, don't ever stop praying. And sisters, whatever, brothers, fathers, pray for your children all the time. I've been so blessed. If I had not made it through that, if I had known back then that God had all this stuff beyond that for me, I would have never imagined taking my life or doing that. I thought all that stuff was so big at that time that that's all I ever had to live for. Little did I know, I had two idols growing up. One was Tony Orlando and the other was Elvis. Loved Elvis, loved Tony Orlando. Anybody in here old enough to remember Tony Orlando and Dawn? I'm coming home, I've done my time. Anyway, I got to meet Tony when he came to Branson in 1992. First time he was here at Roy Clark Theater, I took a picture of me as I was 5 years old holding this Tony Orlando and Dawn album. I was so excited. It's probably the only thing my parents could afford for my birthday. But I got this album. I was so happy. So I took this picture to Tony in 1992, and I'm 21 years old at the time. And we stayed after the show, and I brought it up to him, and I said, hey, I just wanted you to know I was a fan long before today. And he looked at me and just started crying. Tears were rolling down his face. He said, this is the sweetest thing anybody's ever brought me. And I got to say, from that moment on, he and I became friends. And he's taking me out on the road with him, and I've got to sing with my idol. It was pretty cool. Yeah. I would travel with him sometimes. So one night he says, I'm going to bring somebody out on stage. He says he knows every song I've done. So he named one. I went out there and I killed it. Yeah, it was fun. We were in Sault Ste. Marie, way up north. You been there? Oh, you are? Yeah, they won't let me back into Canada. But anyway, that's a whole other testimony. Get to that next year, maybe. No. Anyway, I got to do all these things. I worked for the Backstreet Boys, the Justin Timberlake folks, you name it. I've gotten to go out and do some really cool stuff. And looking back now, I think, man, if I had taken my life back then, I would have never got to do any of this. I was even the ringmaster in the circus for a little while. Right? Hard to imagine, huh? Barnum Bailey? No. Yeah, right. But anyway, I did that. I had a great time. I've gotten to do some really cool stuff. My real estate career the last 10 years, one of the reasons why I started this, people ask me, so why do you sell real estate? Of course, I love it. I love the business part of it. But about 10 years ago, I was really seriously thinking about getting my license. So I finally pulled the trigger, went to school, and some of the best agents in the world, like Tina. Tina, how many times did you take the test? Anybody see that? Once. It took me 8 times. But God was with me. I kept praying through him. I called my mama. I said, Mom, this is the 8th time. You got to pray harder. I'm not getting through this very well. So lo and behold, the 8th time I passed my test. And every year since, I've sold at least $2 or $3 million worth of property, which has been great. And let me tell you why that's a blessing. I started this endeavor of selling real estate about 5 years ago. I finally activated my license. You think I waited too long? After 8 times of taking the test, I was like, I'm tired. It's like now I'm tired from breathing all day. But I did. I passed, and so I got it. So 5 years ago, I was praying about this, and I was in and off the road with some of these groups. I forgot who I was out with. I think it was out with Duran Duran or something. And I come back home, and I don't have a lot of money. We're not rich people or anything, but we get by. So I ended up getting home, and I'm praying about this, going, okay, I'm going to start this real estate thing because I need to start my nonprofit, Choosing to Live. And there's no way to pay for this unless I go get the donations. And that's fine, but I also want to be supported myself. I don't want to do it. I want you, God, to help me get this thing started so I can go out and spread the message. And so 5 or 6 years ago, do we have baseball fans here? Anybody? Anybody know a okay pitcher by the name of Wainwright?
Adam?
Yeah, Adam. That's him. Well, Adam Wainwright came to Springfield, Missouri one day for a rehab assignment, which for some of you ladies that don't know, that's whenever they're like hurt themselves and they're getting a little bit better, so they send them down to the minor leagues and they throw a few and see how they're doing. You know, it's kind of like, they want to go back down here and just see how they do against the youngsters, and then we'll bring them back up to the big club. But Adam was in Springfield one day. I just got back off a tour. I'm in my truck. I go downtown to visit a friend of mine that's got a flea market store. And I leave his place, and I head out on Traffic Way, getting ready to go back home. It's starting to rain. Next thing I know, this minivan comes out of nowhere and sideswipes me. And I'm thinking, okay, great. What are we going to do now? You know, so I get out. This tall, lanky guy gets out of his van, and he's like, well, I'm really sorry about that. I didn't see that sign. I was like, that's okay. You know, and I'm looking at him. His wife gets out of the van, and there's 3 little girls with him. And he's checking to make sure everybody's okay. Yeah, it's good. And he looks at my Tahoe, and he says, man, I'm really sorry about that. He said, do we need to call the police or something? Or that's my fault. And I said, well, how about I'll get a picture of your driver's license. We can follow up later. No big deal. He said, well, man, it's my fault, so I want to pay for your damage. So I get his driver's license. He puts it in my hand, and I'm looking at his wife. I'm going, you all from Springfield? She goes, well, we were at the ballpark. So I go, oh, really? The Cardinals are playing, right? She goes, yeah. I said, yeah, I think Adam Wainwright's pitching today. And she goes, looks at Adam and goes, yeah, he was. And so about that same time, I look at the driver's license, take a picture of it, and it's Adam Wainwright. I go, you're Adam Wainwright. He's like, yeah. Sorry, man. So I said, well, are you okay? Is your arm okay? That was my first question, because I wanted to make sure he was okay, that I didn't disable him or anything, because I didn't want to be that guy. But anyway, long story short, we sat there and visited for a minute. I got a picture, got a photo up so I could put it on Facebook. I was very proud of that moment. Adam Wainwright hit me. But he said, man, just get an estimate on your Tahoe and I'll take care of it. I'm really sorry. So I said, okay, you guys be careful going home. Watch those yield signs. And so I get home, and about 2 weeks later, I sent him an estimate. He wanted me to text it to him. I had his cell phone number, so I texted it to him. He regrets today giving me that. We still talk. But anyway, I texted him the estimate. It was like $1,500. About a week later, I get a check in the mail for $5,000 from Adam. And it went straight to my real estate career. So I was able to pay all my dues. I got my lock boxes. I got all set up. And God saying, yeah, you remember where that came from, right? But it was something I prayed for. And the little things like that we pray for, it's amazing how they just come out of nowhere sometimes. And I'm a big believer that God sometimes puts big problems in our path before he blesses us. And that's been the story of my life, I feel like, a lot of times. So I'm thankful for answered prayers constantly. And how am I doing on time? Oh my gosh, it stopped. Jill, are you kicking me off? Oh my gosh, I've gone over a little bit. So anyway, I could sit here and talk all day and tell you stories about how my blessings have provided enrichment for my life. God has been so good to me when I never thought he would be or could be or should be. And there's still days I wake up like that and I feel that. But just as they were talking about wine earlier, God puts us all through a crushing at times. And we have to become that wine. And that always made so much sense to me because I get it, you know, especially if you like wine. I don't like wine. Dean Martin did. But you have to go through the crushing to become something really fine. And God puts us through so many different things. We all have so many challenges. We're no different. I'm no different than you are. We're all struggling with something. But be cautious of everybody around you and know what they're feeling, know what they're thinking. If you don't know what they're thinking, ask them. If you feel like they're depressed or something's going on with their life, ask them, talk to them. And if I can help it anyway, my phone's always on. My cards are out on the table. My website's neversuicide.org. If I can help one of your loved ones or help them talk through some of this, I've been there in those dark moments. I still deal with depression, and that dark cloud comes over and just hovers over. But I got to pray through it. I never wave the white flag. I never give up. There's days I want to, trust me, but I'm not going to. But God's good. He'll be good to you too. I love you all. Choose to live. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on The Connection Show. Our show is made possible by your support. Please go to our website and click on the Affiliate Partners page now. You can support us either on Venmo or our Cash App today. We love our podcast guests and our social media subscribers. Our channels are made possible by you, our listeners. Please go to our website and go to our Contact Us page and click on all our social media pages. Make sure you click the bell on YouTube and subscribe, and the follow us button on Rumble. Our affiliate partners are featured on our show, and we thank you for supporting them and their products. Each of them have fabulous offerings with discounts when you mention Braveheart when you order. Please order today by going to braveheartworkshops.com and clicking on Affiliate Partners.